Behind the shimmering domes and deadly carousel ceremonies of this 1976 sci-fi classic lies a treasure trove of bizarre production secrets, from Texas governors visiting the set to actors using pennies as costume buttons, real drownings at filming locations, and a robot that predicted Darth Vader. The making of this dystopian masterpiece was stranger than fiction. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Logan's Run. Fact 1. The lead actors were all too old to live. In one of Hollywood's most ironic casting decisions, the three main male actors in Logan's Run were all technically too old to survive in the world they were portraying on screen. Michael York, who played the titular Logan 5, was 33 years old during filming in 1975. Richard Jordan, cast as his fellow Sandman Francis Seven, was also over 30, and Michael Anderson Jr., who portrayed the character Doc, had similarly passed the deadly age threshold that defined the movie's central premise. This casting paradox becomes even more amusing when you consider that Logan's Run depicts a dystopian future society where reaching your 30th birthday means mandatory termination through a ritual called Carousel. The entire plot revolves around Logan's desperate attempt to escape death as his own 30th birthday approaches, yet the actor playing him had already been living illegally in that world for 3 full years. The age issue wasn't lost on the production team, but they had practical reasons for their choices. The original novel by William F. Nolan and George Clayton Johnson actually set the death age at 21, which would have made casting even more challenging. Screenwriter David Zelig Goodman wisely raised the age limit to 30, specifically to allow for a broader range of experienced actors who could handle the complex roles. Michael York himself was well aware of the contradiction and found it rather humorous. In later interviews, he jokingly referred to himself as a fraud, but noted that his youthful appearance helped him get away with playing a character supposedly younger than his actual age. The irony extended beyond just the main cast, as numerous extras and supporting actors throughout the film were also well past the fictional society's expiration date, creating a movie where the supposedly perfect young society was populated largely by people who would have been executed years earlier. Fact 2. Farrah Fawcett was cast playing tennis. Long before Farrah Fawcett became a household name as one of Charlie's Angels, her path to stardom began with a chance encounter on a tennis court that led to her role in Logan's Run. Michael York, who was already cast as the film's lead character Logan 5, discovered the future television icon during a casual visit to a mutual friend's house in Los Angeles. York was spending time at this friend's home when he spotted an extraordinarily beautiful blonde woman playing tennis on the property's court. Intrigued by her striking appearance and natural charisma, he struck up a conversation and learned that she was an aspiring actress trying to make her mark in Hollywood. At the time, Fawcett had only appeared in a handful of small television roles and commercials, making her relatively unknown in the entertainment industry. Impressed by what he saw, York took it upon himself to recommend Fawcett to the Logan's Run casting directors for the role of Holly 13, a character who works in the futuristic beauty salon called New You. His suggestion proved to be spot on, and Fawcett landed the part, which became one of her first significant film appearances. In his autobiography titled Accidentally on Purpose, published by Simon & Schuster in 1992, York took credit for what he called talent spotting Fawcett during that tennis game. However, he was characteristically modest about his role in launching her career, noting that while he could take responsibility for getting her the Logan's Run role, he certainly couldn't claim credit for her subsequent extraordinary success in television and film. The timing of this discovery was particularly fortuitous, as Logan's Run was released in June 1976, just months before Fawcett would become a global sensation when Charlie's Angels premiered in September of that same year. This means her appearance in the science fiction film represents a fascinating glimpse of the future superstar just before she achieved worldwide fame, and became one of the most recognizable faces of the 1970s popular culture. Fact 3. The Water Gardens location became deadly. The Fort Worth Water Gardens, which served as the dramatic backdrop for Logan and Jessica's return to the Dome City, later became the site of multiple tragic drownings that occurred in the exact same location where the film's climactic scenes were shot. During the 1975 filming of Logan's Run, the main pool of this architectural landmark was 9 feet deep, creating the perfect setting for the characters' desperate dive back into their enclosed world. The Water Gardens, designed by renowned architect Philip Johnson and completed in 1974, featured 3 distinct water features, with the active pool being the most prominent and visually striking. This particular pool, with its cascading waterfalls and geometric concrete steps, was chosen by the filmmakers to represent the entrance point back into the futuristic city, where Logan and Jessica make their final return after discovering the truth about the outside world. The concrete structure's design created a series of stepped terraces that allowed water to flow down multiple levels, ultimately collecting in the main pool at the bottom. During filming, actors Michael York and Jenny Agutter performed their dramatic plunge into these waters, which appeared both futuristic and dangerous on screen. The depth of 9 feet was significant enough to make the stunt challenging while providing the visual impact needed for the scene. However, the same features that made the location cinematically perfect also created serious safety hazards for regular visitors. The combination of the pool's depth, the powerful water currents created by the cascading falls, and the slippery concrete surfaces proved to be a deadly combination. Between 1999 and 2004, 4 people lost their lives in drowning accidents at the Water Gardens, with these tragedies occurring near the very spot where York and Agutter had performed their fictional escape decades earlier. Following these tragic incidents, city officials made the difficult decision to close the active pool in 2004. When it reopened 3 years later, in 2007, significant safety modifications had been implemented, including reducing the water depth from 9 feet to just 2 feet, fundamentally changing the character of this iconic location forever. Fact 4. Peter Ustinov used pennies as buttons. Peter Ustinov's portrayal of the old man in Logan's Run became one of the film's most memorable performances, thanks in part to his creative problem-solving both on and off camera, including his unusual solution for costuming that involved using actual United States pennies as buttons on his character's weathered clothing. The legendary British actor, who was known for his wit and improvisational skills, found himself faced with a wardrobe challenge that required some unconventional thinking during the production. When it came time to dress the old man character, who represents the last elderly person alive in a world that has forgotten what aging looks like, the costume department needed buttons for his tattered makeshift clothing. However, Ustinov apparently couldn't locate any suitable regular buttons that would work for the character's rustic, cobbled-together appearance. Rather than delay filming or send someone on a lengthy search for appropriate costume pieces, the resourceful actor simply reached into his pocket and used ordinary pennies instead. This practical solution actually worked perfectly for the character, as the old man was supposed to be someone who had survived outside the Dome City using whatever materials he could find. The copper coins served as believable makeshift buttons for someone who would have had to repair and modify clothing using any available materials over many years of solitary survival. Ustinov's creative approach extended far beyond his costume choices, as he improvised most of his dialogue throughout the filming process rather than sticking strictly to the written script. His spontaneous delivery and natural storytelling ability brought an authentic grandfatherly quality to the role that helped ground the science fiction story in human emotion. The actor's improvisational talents included incorporating pieces of literature into his performance, including excerpts from T.S. Eliot's poetry about cats, which he delivered in what Michael York later described as a marvelous, swampy Southern accent. This combination of practical costume solutions and creative dialogue improvisation helped create one of the film's most beloved and believable characters, despite the futuristic setting. Fact 5. Carousel was deliberately misspelled. One of the most debated details in Logan's Run involves the spelling of the central death ritual that defines the entire society, which appears in the opening credits as Carousel, rather than the more familiar English spelling of Carousel. This unusual spelling choice has sparked decades of discussion among fans and critics about whether it was an intentional artistic decision or simply an overlooked mistake that made it into the final version of the film. The spelling Carousel represents the original French version of the word, which refers to the rotating platform ride that most people associate with amusement parks and fairs. In French, the double R spelling has been used for centuries, dating back to the word's origins in equestrian training exercises where knights would practice their skills on rotating platforms. However, when the word entered the English language, it was typically adapted to the single R spelling of carousel. The central importance of this ritual in Logan's Run cannot be overstated, as Carousel represents the moment when citizens who reach their 30th birthday must participate in a ceremony that supposedly offers them a chance at renewal or rebirth. In reality, the ritual is a method of population control that results in the death of every participant, though the citizens believe they might be reborn as infants if they are chosen during the ceremony. Given that Logan's Run is clearly an American production set in a future version of the United States with English-speaking characters, many viewers and critics have pointed out that using the French spelling seems inconsistent with the film's context. The movie contains no other French elements or references that would justify this linguistic choice, making it stand out as particularly unusual. Whether the filmmakers intentionally chose the French spelling to give the ritual a more exotic or sophisticated feel, or whether it was simply an error that went unnoticed during post-production, remains unclear. The spelling appears prominently in the opening text that sets up the story's premise, making it one of the first things audiences notice about the film, which has contributed to ongoing debates about its significance among science fiction enthusiasts. Fact 6. The Sandman guns used real fire. The futuristic weapons carried by the Sandmen in Logan's Run were far more dangerous and realistic than most movie props, as they actually produced genuine flames using a sophisticated system that combined acetylene gas with hot glow plugs to create working flame-throwing devices. Unlike typical Hollywood weapons that rely on visual effects or harmless light beams, these props were essentially functional torches that could produce real fire on command during filming. The Sandman guns, officially known as deep sleep weapons in the film's mythology, were designed to look sleek and futuristic while incorporating practical flame-producing technology. The system worked by storing acetylene gas in small cartridges located at the rear of each weapon, which would then be released and ignited by a heated glow plug when the actor pulled the trigger. This created an actual burst of flame that extended from the barrel, giving the weapons their distinctive and intimidating appearance on screen. This approach was quite unusual for movie props of the 1970s, as most science fiction films relied on optical effects added in post-production or simple light effects to simulate futuristic weapons. The decision to use real flame created a more authentic and visually striking effect, but it also introduced significant safety concerns for the actors and crew members during filming. The acetylene gas system was the same type of fuel mixture used in welding torches and mining equipment, making these props genuinely hazardous tools that required careful handling and safety protocols on set. The cartridges had to be properly maintained and replaced regularly, and the glow plugs needed to be heated to the correct temperature to ensure reliable ignition of the gas. The sparks visible when the Sandmen fire their weapons are completely real rather than added visual effects, which contributes to the authentic appearance of the flame bursts. This made Logan's Run one of the few films of its era to use actual working guns that produced real fire, creating a unique and memorable visual element that helped distinguish the movie's action sequences from other science fiction films of the same period. Fact 7. A Texas governor visited the set. During the filming of Logan's Run at the Dallas Market Center in 1975, the production received an unexpected and high-profile visitor when Texas Governor Dolph Briscoe decided to drop by and see what all the excitement was about. The governor's impromptu visit came during one of the busiest periods of filming, when hundreds of local Texas residents had been recruited to serve as extras for the massive crowd scenes that take place in the futuristic city's Great Hall. The Dallas Market Center, which served as the primary filming location for the domed city's interior scenes, had become a hub of activity that was drawing considerable attention throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Producer Saul David had chosen various Dallas buildings for their futuristic architectural qualities, noting that Texas seemed to be architecturally several centuries ahead of the rest of the country, making it the perfect backdrop for a film set in the 23rd century. The scale of the production was impressive enough to warrant gubernatorial attention, as the filmmakers were utilizing the massive spaces within the Market Center's Great Hall, a 5-level arena that measured 280 feet long, 150 feet wide, and 60 feet high. This enormous space was capable of accommodating up to 4,500 people during shows or exhibits, making it ideal for the large-scale scenes that required hundreds of extras to populate the futuristic society. Governor Briscoe's visit reflected the significant economic impact that the Logan's Run production was having on the local Texas economy, as the filmmakers had hired hundreds of local residents, not just as extras, but also in various crew positions. The production had saved approximately $3 million by utilizing readily available Dallas locations rather than building expensive sets in Hollywood studios. The governor's appearance on set also highlighted the pride that Texas officials felt about their state being chosen to represent the future, particularly given producer David's comments about the advanced architectural qualities of Texas buildings. This kind of high-profile political attention was relatively unusual for film productions in the mid-1970s, making Briscoe's visit a memorable moment for the cast and crew. Fact 8. Box was the first Darth Vader. According to academic Martin Kevorkian, a professor of English at the University of Texas at Austin, the menacing robot character Box from Logan's Run served as an important precursor to one of cinema's most famous villains, Darth Vader from Star Wars, which was released just 1 year later in 1977. Kevorkian's analysis focuses on the significant connection between these two intimidating characters, particularly regarding the voice actors who brought them to life. Both Box and Darth Vader were voiced by prominent African-American actors who used their distinctive vocal talents to create memorable and threatening characters hidden behind masks or mechanical exteriors. In Logan's Run, accomplished actor Roscoe Lee Brown provided the voice for Box, the food processing robot that Logan and Jessica encounter in the ice caverns outside the domed city. Brown, who was known for his sophisticated speaking style and classical training, gave Box a chillingly calm and methodical way of speaking that made the character particularly unsettling. The following year, James Earl Jones would use his powerful, resonant voice to create Darth Vader's iconic presence in Star Wars, establishing one of the most recognizable villain voices in film history. Both actors were physically hidden from view, with their performances relying entirely on vocal delivery to create fear and menace in audiences. Professor Kevorkian argued that this pattern represented what he called racializing cyberphobic primers available to Generation X, suggesting that both characters helped establish a template for how threatening artificial or masked villains would be portrayed in science fiction films. The similarity between Box's methodical, emotionless delivery and Vader's commanding presence demonstrates how voice acting could be used to create memorable antagonists even when the performers themselves remained completely invisible. Box's role as a malfunctioning robot who has been killing and preserving humans for food storage shares thematic elements with Vader's mechanical nature and his role as an enforcer of a totalitarian system. Both characters represent the intersection of technology and menace that would become increasingly common in science fiction cinema throughout the late 1970s and beyond. Fact 9. The film crew is visible in Box's body. One of the most amusing production mistakes in Logan's run occurs during the tense ice cavern scenes with the robot Box, where careful viewers can actually spot reflections of the film crew, including cameras and equipment, bouncing off the character's highly polished metallic surface. This unintentional, behind-the-scenes glimpse happened because Box's costume was designed with a mirror-like finish that created perfect reflective surfaces, turning the robot into an inadvertent window into the filmmaking process. Box appears during one of the movie's most suspenseful sequences when Logan and Jessica escape the Dome City and encounter this malfunctioning food processing robot in the frozen caverns outside their world. The character was brought to life by actor Roscoe Lee Brown, who wore an elaborate metallic costume that completely covered his body, creating the appearance of a mechanical being with a gleaming, chrome-like exterior. The reflective quality of Box's costume was essential to the character's visual impact, as it needed to look genuinely robotic and technological rather than like a person in a suit. The designers achieved this effect by using highly polished metallic materials that created mirror-like surfaces across the robot's body, particularly on the torso and limbs where the reflective areas were most prominent. However, this design choice created unexpected challenges during filming, as the costume essentially became a collection of curved mirrors that captured everything happening around the character during each scene. The film crew, cameras, lighting equipment, and other production elements that were positioned just outside the camera frame became visible as distorted reflections across Box's body, creating unintended glimpses of the movie-making process. These reflections are most noticeable during close-up shots of Box, when the camera moves in for dramatic effect and the curved surfaces of the costume capture wider angles of the surrounding film set. While these production mistakes might have been caught and corrected in later decades with digital technology, they remain embedded in the original 1976 release, offering modern viewers an accidental peek behind the curtain of this classic science fiction production. Fact 10. Richard Nixon's scene was cut. The filmmakers of Logan's Run originally planned to include a pointed political joke about former President Richard Nixon, but the scene was ultimately removed from the final version because studio executives considered it too controversial for audiences in 1976. This deleted moment would have occurred during the sequence where the old man shows Logan and Jessica portraits of historical figures that once hung on the walls of the United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C. The scene took place in the ruins of the Senate chamber, where Peter Ustinov's character, the old man, had been living alone with his cats for many years, after the rest of humanity retreated into the domed cities. As the last person to remember the old world, the old man served as a living link to America's past, explaining to Logan and Jessica what life was like before their society's rigid population control system was established. During this educational sequence, the old man was supposed to point to a portrait of Nixon and make a reference to the former president by saying something along the lines of, "They used to call him Tricky something," clearly alluding to Nixon's famous nickname, Tricky Dick, that had been widely used by his political opponents and critics throughout his career. The timing of this planned joke was particularly significant, as Logan's Run was being produced and released in the immediate aftermath of the Watergate scandal and Nixon's resignation from the presidency in August 1974. The wounds from this political crisis were still fresh in the American public consciousness when filming began in 1975. making any reference to the disgraced former president a potentially sensitive subject. Studio executives ultimately decided that including this political commentary would be too risky and might alienate certain audience members or create unnecessary controversy around what was intended to be an entertaining science fiction adventure. The decision to cut the Nixon reference reflected the general reluctance of major Hollywood studios during this period to include overtly political content that might be seen as taking sides in recent political disputes. Fact 11. The budget tripled during production. What began as a modest $3 million science fiction project for MGM quickly spiraled into a $9 million production, making Logan's Run the most expensive film the studio had made in an entire decade, and creating significant financial pressure during the mid-1970s when the movie industry was already struggling with rising costs. This dramatic budget escalation occurred gradually throughout the production process, as the ambitious scope of creating a believable futuristic world proved far more expensive than anyone had initially anticipated. The bulk of this massive cost overrun was directly attributed to the elaborate sets that were required to bring the domed city of the 23rd century to life on screen. While the filmmakers saved approximately $3 million by utilizing existing Dallas locations like the Market Center and Fort Worth Water Gardens, they still needed to construct numerous interior sets at MGM's Culver City Studios to represent the various areas within the futuristic society. The production required 9 entire sound stages at the MGM facility, which hosted one of the largest miniature cities ever built for a film at that time. These sets had to convincingly portray everything from the massive Carousel chamber, where citizens faced their mandatory termination, to the living quarters, shopping areas, and various specialized locations like the Love Shop and New U Surgical Center that were essential to the story. The miniature work alone represented a significant portion of the budget, as the filmmakers needed to create detailed models of the domed city that would look believable in wide shots and establishing sequences. The special effects team also had to develop new techniques for the carousel sequence, which required hidden wires to make the participants appear to levitate before their destruction. Roger Ebert noted in his review that the $9 million figure was being whispered around Hollywood as an example of how expensive science fiction films were becoming. This budget escalation foreshadowed the even more dramatic cost increases that would come with films like Star Wars the following year, marking a turning point in how studios approached big-budget science fiction productions. Fact 12. William Devane quit for Hitchcock. The role of Francis Seven, Logan's fellow Sandman and eventual antagonist, was originally offered to William Devane, who had been officially announced as part of the Logan's Run cast in May 1975, before making a career decision that would significantly alter the film's casting. Devane, who was known for his intense dramatic performances in films and television, had been specifically described as playing an elite Sandman in the early production announcements for the science fiction project. However, Devane received an offer that proved impossible to refuse when legendary filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock personally requested him to join the cast of what would become the master of suspense's final film, Family Plot. This opportunity arose because Hitchcock needed to replace actor Roy Thinnes, who had originally been cast in the thriller but was no longer available for the production. The chance to work with Hitchcock, who was nearing the end of his illustrious career and was already recognized as one of cinema's greatest directors, represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that few actors would have been willing to pass up. Family Plot, which was released in 1976, would indeed prove to be Hitchcock's last completed film, making Devane's decision even more significant in retrospect. When Devane withdrew from Logan's Run, the filmmakers needed to quickly find a replacement who could handle the complex role of Francis, a character who starts as Logan's friend and partner, but becomes his primary pursuer when Logan becomes a runner himself. The producers turned to Richard Jordan an accomplished actor who was well known for his performances in westerns like Lawman and Chato's Land, as well as the film Rooster Cogburn starring John Wayne. Jordan had also recently appeared in the television miniseries Captains and the Kings, which had aired in 1976 and showcased his to handle dramatic roles in period settings. His casting proved to be an excellent choice, as Jordan brought a compelling intensity to the role of Francis that helped create one of the film's most memorable character dynamics. Fact 13. It tied with King Kong for the Oscar. Logan's Run achieved a rare honor at the 1977 Academy Awards ceremony when it shared the Special Achievement Award for Best Visual Effects with the big-budget remake of King Kong, creating an unusual tie that recognized both films for their groundbreaking technical accomplishments in very different areas of movie magic. This shared award highlighted how 1976 had been an exceptional year for visual effects innovation, with two major studio productions pushing the boundaries of what was possible in science fiction and monster movie spectacle. The Academy's decision to award both films reflected the distinct but equally impressive approaches each production had taken to create their visual effects. Logan's Run had impressed voters with its elaborate miniature work, including one of the largest model cities ever constructed for a film, along with a complex carousel sequence that required hidden wires to make participants appear to levitate before their destruction. The film also featured genuine hologram technology, which was cutting-edge for the mid-1970s. Meanwhile, the King Kong remake had earned recognition for its mechanical effects, particularly the massive robotic ape and the functional giant hands that could actually grip and manipulate actress Jessica Lange during filming. The King Kong production had also created detailed full-size body parts, including legs that allowed actors to interact with what appeared to be a living giant creature. Interestingly, several of the same effects artists worked on both productions, including Glenn Robinson, who supervised special mechanical effects for King Kong and also contributed to Logan's Run. This cross-pollination of talent between the two films may have contributed to the Academy's decision to honor both projects equally rather than choosing a single winner. The tie was particularly significant because it demonstrated that science fiction films were finally being recognized by the Academy for serious technical achievement, rather than being dismissed as mere genre entertainment. This recognition helped pave the way for the even greater success that Star Wars would achieve at the following year's ceremony, marking a turning point in how Hollywood and critics viewed science fiction cinema. Fact 14. A Vulcan salute snuck into the final scene. During the climactic final scene of Logan's Run, when the citizens of the domed city gather in wonder around Peter Ustinov's old man character, one observant extra managed to slip a playful reference to Star Trek into the film by briefly flashing the iconic Vulcan salute with his hand raised above the crowd. This unauthorized gesture appears for approximately 2 seconds in the background of the shot before the camera angle changes, creating an unintentional crossover between two science fiction properties that has delighted fans for decades. The moment occurs during one of the film's most dramatic sequences, when Logan and Jessica have successfully returned to the city with proof that life exists beyond the domes and that people can live past the age of 30. The revelation causes the city's computer system to malfunction and ultimately destroys the society's rigid population control system, leading to the collapse of the domed structures and freeing the citizens to explore the outside world for the first time. As hundreds of extras playing the newly liberated citizens crowd around the old man, who represents their first glimpse of what aging actually looks like, most of them are simply waving their hands in excitement or reaching out to touch this unprecedented figure. However, one enterprising background actor decided to make his brief screen time memorable by performing the distinctive hand gesture that fans of Star Trek would immediately recognize. The Vulcan salute which involves separating the fingers into a V shape between the middle and ring fingers while keeping the thumb extended, was created by Leonard Nimoy for his character Spock on the original Star Trek television series. At the time Logan's Run was filmed in 1975, Star Trek had been off the air for several years and was still considered a relatively obscure, canceled show, rather than the cultural phenomenon it would later become. The extra who performed the salute later claimed that his mother, who worked as a Dallas talent agent, had sent him to the filming location to participate as background talent, making this gesture a spontaneous act of science fiction fandom. Fact 15. Rainbow tape was brand new technology. Logan's Run became a testing ground for cutting-edge technology in multiple ways, most notably through the filmmakers' use of rainbow tape, which had just been invented and was applied to the elaborate miniature city models to create a distinctly futuristic visual effect that helped distinguish the film from other science fiction movies of the era. This brand new material allowed the special effects team to add colorful, iridescent details to the massive model sets that represented the domed city, giving the structures a high-tech appearance that suggested advanced 23rd century construction materials. The rainbow tape created prismatic light effects that changed color depending on the viewing angle, making the miniature buildings and walkways appear to shimmer with an otherworldly quality when filmed under the studio lights. This effect was particularly important for the wide establishing shots that showed the full scope of the domed city, as the colorful accents helped sell the illusion that audiences were looking at a real futuristic metropolis rather than a detailed model constructed on a soundstage. The timing of rainbow tape's invention coincided perfectly with Logan's Run's production schedule, allowing the filmmakers to incorporate this new material into their designs just as it became commercially available. The special effects team recognized that traditional model-making materials would look too ordinary for a film set nearly 300 years in the future, so they embraced this innovative tape as a way to make their miniatures look appropriately advanced. Logan's Run also achieved another technological first by becoming the initial film to utilize Dolby stereo sound on 70mm prints, representing a significant advancement in movie theater audio quality. This stereo sound system allowed audiences to experience Jerry Goldsmith's electronic musical score and the film's various sound effects with much greater clarity and spatial positioning than had been possible with previous theater sound systems. These technological innovations, from the visual effects using rainbow tape to the advanced audio presentation, helped establish Logan's Run as a forward-thinking production that was genuinely trying to push the boundaries of what cinema could achieve in the mid-1970s.